Hi, welcome to SBR Videos. I'm Peter Loshak. Today is Saturday, April 16th, and we are talking MLB betting and handicapping with SBR contributor Ian Cameron. This is our regular series of shows where we take a look at upcoming series in Major League Baseball. Right now, we're going to take a look at the series that go early next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Ian Cameron, thanks for being back with us. The first series I want to ask you about is Seattle at Cleveland. Now, in the last time we did this show, I gave the suggestion that I was leaning towards the Mets in their current series at Cleveland. They won the first game. I'm kind of liking them in their second game today with Matt Harvey going, and I'm feeling roughly the same way about the series upcoming next week at home against Seattle. Seattle, a team with a lineup that seems, kind of potent. They have been winning on the road. They've been doing great on the road. Their starting pitching should be good enough, and the lines probably won't be too inflated. Cleveland kind of underwhelming. What do you think about taking Seattle next week at Cleveland?
Yeah, Cleveland's got very good pitching, Peter, but you're definitely right on the offensive side. They're lacking quite a bit, this Cleveland Indians baseball team. And right now, that's been probably the biggest concern they're going to have all season long is, are they going to be able to manufacture enough offense and get enough timely hitting to support a pitching staff that on paper looks pretty good? Seattle, on the other hand, and that's probably why Cleveland, this 4-4 start they've had, it's been a little bit of a mixed bag for them because sometimes they've gotten very good pitching and they just haven't gotten these pitchers, Kluber among them, and the others have just not gotten enough run support basically in order to preserve pretty good outings from a lot of their starting pitchers. And on the other hand, you've got a Seattle team. I've been pretty impressed with what they can throw at opposing teams offensively. I mean, they're off to a 4-6 start, maybe. Their pitching at times, Seattle, has been a little bit lackluster, but from an offensive standpoint, Robinson Cano, he's gotten off to a solid start this year. Of course, still have Nelson Cruz, Kyle Seager. They've definitely got some potent bats in this Seattle lineup that should be able to, cause some difficulties for Cleveland's pitching. And if the offense continues to stumble here, Peter, for the Indians, it could end up being a situation where the pitching is just going to have to be spot on and just almost a shutdown mode for 9 innings if they're going to win this series. Obviously, it's dictated on what we see for prices in this series, game in and game out. But Cleveland, to me, as much as I want to support their pitchers, Peter, I feel that a lot of their pitchers, Carrasco, Salazar, Kluber, a lot of these guys are priced very, very high in the betting markets. You don't get great value going with them because they're such high strikeout guys, and the betting markets and odds makers are attracted to pitchers like that. So in theory, I don't argue with your point, Peter, about Seattle maybe having some betting value in this one. They have been solid so far this season on the road. Going to be interesting to see what prices we get in this series. But, for me, Cleveland, from a value standpoint, as good as their pitchers can be a little bit tricky to support them from a value standpoint when their offense at times just doesn't give their pitchers the run support they need to win games on a consistent basis.
Okay, yeah, sounds like we're in complete agreement on that one. The next series I want to ask about, the Dodgers at Atlanta. Now, Atlanta did get a win, got their first win of the year, but whoop-de-doo on that one, right? I'd like to see them do it again. This is not a team that still impresses any of us that much, and the Dodgers, with all their injuries, with all their issues, still a team that's generally winning and getting it done. How big of a favorite will they be in this series? A big favorite, a huge favorite, but it might be warranted. They might be one of those favorites where the market just can't quite make the lines high enough. I'm just not sold on Atlanta, although I admit that I did bet Miami in the game where they lost to Atlanta. But as of right now, not sold on Atlanta. I want to get your thoughts on this because I'm thinking about leaning towards the Dodgers basically every game in their upcoming series. What do you think, Ian Cameron?
Yeah, good. Congratulations to the Atlanta Braves and the Minnesota Twins for winning the World Series last night. Oh, I'm sorry, they just won their first game. I apologize, but that could be a World Series type of victory for both of those teams last night. Atlanta and Minnesota finally getting off the schneid with victories, their first one of the season. But as for Atlanta, their bullpen scares me, Peter. I've said that on more than one occasion. You might get situations where their pitching can hold up for a bit, but their bullpen just gives it all away in the latter innings. Obviously, the Dodgers in this series should have the advantage, but I'm just not a bettor that looks to support big-time inflated road chalk, road favorites very often. I mean, it's just not a profile that long-term is good for growing a bankroll. That being said, where's Atlanta's advantages in this series? It's hard to find any. I mean, lineup wise, you got to give the edge to the Dodgers, even though they're still dealing with a couple of injuries here and there. Their starting pitching certainly is better than Atlanta, top to bottom. I've been impressed with the Japanese guy, Kenta Maeda, as well for this Dodgers team. I mean, he's really come in and really done a pretty good job in this rotation, lending support to ace Clayton Kershaw, and especially with Hyunjin Ryu starting the season on the DL for the Dodgers on their rotation. So that's been a big boost for the LA Dodgers this season so far. So you got to like what you've seen from their pitching. Bullpen at times a little spotty with this Dodgers team, but as long as they can hand the ball to Kenley Jansen, the closer, in the latter stages, they're going to be fine. They might be able to do that because it's a situation where if Atlanta's starters don't pitch deep into this series, Dodgers offense certainly has the capability of making some things happen against a very porous Atlanta bullpen. So, again, in theory, LA Dodgers have the edge, should be able to win this series and control it. But, they're going to be a pretty hefty road favorite, Peter. That's my concern. And that's just a betting profile that I try to stay away from in MLB.
Okay, for sure. Fair enough, Ian Cameron. And then the third series I want to ask about is the Angels at the White Sox. Now, the White Sox maybe a little bit under the radar. They're actually winning. They're actually doing pretty well right now. I kind of like their team makeup at the moment. And as we've discussed in previous shows, the Angels are a team that we're in general, kind of down on and looking to be overvalued because they basically, they have Trout and not a whole lot else. And the pitching matchups for this series, I definitely like Santiago for the Angels, but the other three, Shoemaker, Richards, and Weaver, they can be good, but in general, not totally enthused about those guys. And my sense is that the favorite lines here, or underdog lines, as the case may be, might not be too inflated for the White Sox. And I'm leaning towards maybe looking for value with the White Sox in this series. What do you think about that, Ian Cameron?
You know what? I don't argue with that. Chicago White Sox, let's give them some credit. Well, it's really good start to the season, 8-2. I've never been a big Ventura fan. Robin Ventura, the manager of this team, I think he can make some really bonehead decisions at times. But nevertheless, I mean, you can't argue with the results so far from the Chicago White Sox. 8-2 start. In profitability, they're one of the top teams so far in Major League Baseball, cashing tickets for their backers. A very positive sign indeed there. And pitching-wise, for the LA Angels, they lost to the Minnesota Twins, Minnesota getting their first win on Friday night against LA Angels with the Angels ace on the mound, Garrett Richards. And if you're not winning games with Garrett Richards on the mound, who to me, Peter, is by far the best pitcher on that Angels rotation, you got issues. And the issues, again, are last night, not enough offense from an Angels team that I've said repeatedly, don't trust this offense one bit. This is a scattershot lineup. You get outside of Trout, you get outside of Pujols, you get outside of maybe a guy like Cole Calhoun who's capable with the bat. You get outside of those big three guys and those big three sluggers in that lineup, and there's a big drop-off for the rest of the lineup. I mean, Yunel Escobar is not going to give you quality at bats. C.J. Cron is not a guy that's routinely going to take pitches and give you quality at bats on a regular basis. So there's a lot of weaknesses, especially, in the middle to bottom part of that LA Angels lineup, and that's a concern here. I mean, it's just an offense that right now have a hard time trusting them to hit, decent pitching. And in terms of pitching, the White Sox, you got to give a lot of their starters credit. I'm seeing some great statistics. Chris Sale's off to a good start, 3-0, sub-3 ERA. How about Jose Quintana, 2.31 ERA? Carlos Rodon, a guy that's been an enigma early in his major league career. He's got a 1.38 ERA so far. Matt Latos, a reclamation project here for the Chicago White Sox. He's even pitched pretty good baseball. 1 run in 12 innings this season for Latos. Won both of his starts so far to this point for the Chicago White Sox. So you can't argue with what they've done so far. And even their bullpen, they've got some decent arms out there. Petrichka can pitch. Nate Jones can pitch. David Robertson, the closer, has done a pretty good job this season for the White Sox. So that bullpen's been pretty rock solid. The offense has done enough. Good starts to the season for the likes of Melky Cabrera, Jose Abreu. Has gotten off to a decent start. Adam Eaton hitting the ball very well as well for the White Sox. There's a lot to like about Chicago. Can they sustain it for a full season for a team that a lot of people weren't so high on coming into the year? That remains to be seen. You don't want to rush to snap judgments on any team just a couple of weeks into the season. But right now, positive signs for the Chicago White Sox. They're getting some timely hitting. Starting pitching has held up. The bullpen's been solid. Definitely positive signs for the White Sox right now. Can they continue remains to be seen. But in this particular series, against the LA Angels. Definitely a lot more high right now on what I've seen from the White Sox than what I've seen from the LA Angels. I wouldn't argue with you one bit here, Peter. I think we might be able to find some spots and matchups here to back the White Sox.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for all your insightful thoughts. As always, Ian Cameron, on the 3 series I wanted to ask about. Is there anything else you'd like to bring to our attention from the early week series that start next week?
Yeah, it's going to end up being a very interesting situation here. Cubs and Cardinals. How about that series that's going to come our way later in the week? I mean, it's going to be a very interesting series. We saw the Chicago Cubs bats a little bit cooled off yesterday in a loss to the Colorado Rockies, but that's going to be a big early season set the tone kind of series. Cubs and the Cardinals. And the Cardinals are pounding the baseball right now. That offense is on fire right now for St. Louis. They've got the bats going, everybody contributing right now for that St. Louis lineup. That's a great series. I would honestly be looking for value on the Cubs because I think the Cardinals, in terms of their offense, especially going to regress a little bit, but it depends on the prices we see. But if there's one series that I'm interested in quite a bit, in the middle of this week, that Cubs-Cardinals battle in the NL Central should be a fun one to watch this week.
Yeah, that was actually one of the borderline series I wanted to ask you about, and I agree with you. I wanted to get your thoughts on St. Louis's offensive production, whether you thought that was real or a little bit of a mirage. Obviously, you think it's a little bit of a mirage. We might have some value with the Cubs coming up this weekend. Early next week. Ian Cameron, thanks so much. Talk to you again very soon.
Thanks, Peter. Enjoy the games and good luck.